Welcome to the 2-Minute Drill presented by Ancon Construction, where our goal is to be the educational leader for the construction and design build industry. Joining us today is Ryan White, Managing Broker for Pinnacle Properties. Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
You know, before we design something, before we build something, we have to have land to build it on. Before you build a business, sometimes you have to lease a space if you don't build your own building. So today, we're really going to talk about something called TI, which is tenant improvements. So these are improvements that are made to a space that you're leasing out to help build out the portion of the business. That way you can operate inside of that space. So when you hear, as a person who deals with TI for your clients all the time, what do you think and what revolves around TI when you're thinking about that definition?
I think about businesses and the improvements they need to make the space work. Most of the time, it's the building isn't going to be exactly fit to the way they need it. The previous user didn't use it the same as what they're going to use it. So ideally, there's situations where the landlord or tenant might build out things specific to improve that property to work best for that business.
Right, and it's not only just the person leasing the space's role in it. The owners do play a role when it comes to tenant improvements. So kind of walk us through what's I know there's no such thing as traditional, but how does that work where the owner of the building is involved in tenant improvements, and why would they want to do that?
Right. It could go either way. Either the tenant could pay for it, the landlord. Most often you're going to see the landlord pay for that. The reason being that the tenant has other costs that they're using to get this business moved over to the new location. There's moving costs, there's setup costs, they might be purchasing new equipment. So they can't do that on top of also improving another building. From an accounting standpoint, it's also, now that they don't own the building, they're a tenant, they don't want to be spending a bunch of money on a property they don't own.
Right, right. So as someone who's getting ready to take over a new space or thinking about leasing or renting a space, what are some of the common mistakes that you see people doing when they're starting down that process?
What I commonly see is, most businesses, they don't move every day or every year or even every decade. So they're not doing this often. So they might see something that they have in mind, what they expect out of the building. But if you're not doing this every day, it's hard to really understand it. It's best to have professionals like Ancon that are working with them hand in hand who do deal with this on a daily basis to understand really how to set things up for them from an operational standpoint, and even from like an economic savings. There's ways that obviously as a professional you'll know to possibly work around things to help save them money, because they don't do this every day, and Ancon does.
Right, and just like how Ancon sees the constructability of a project, having a professional real estate person like yourself and Pinnacle Properties during the lease negotiation, the writing of that is also something that provides tremendous value. I've seen a lot of times where people rent these spaces out on their own and don't have someone in their corner. And what does it mean to have someone who knows, the terms and lingos that are in these lease contracts working for that client as far as tenant improvements? Right.
Kind of like the same as the previous question. I mean, they're not doing leases day in, day out. That is what we do. Right. So we're professionals, been handling this for 20 years now. There's a lot of different aspects that go into the lease. A big proponent of that is the tenant improvements. So understanding how that gets paid out, whether it's up front, whether it's through amortized over the lease.
Right.
How does a landlord perceive that, and how do you implement that as the best way for the tenant to get the best value for them?
And sometimes those improvement dollars change if it's a 3-year, 5-year, 7-year, 10-year lease, right? Because the longer the owner knows that you're going to sign a lease, the more incentive they have to provide some more TI dollars to have you secured as a long-term tenant.
Exactly, and some of those improvements might fall into two categories, where it's improvements that are specific towards the tenant's use, and it's not something that the landlord could actually recapture, versus some improvements that they need that are actually adding value to the real estate that aren't necessarily, there's still TI improvements, but there's value to that landlord. So you kind of put those into two separate categories, and how that gets amortized over the lease is important.
And I think one of the things that we appreciate working with you a lot of times is that you will take our suggestions for maybe some value engineering ideas and implement them and be that liaison between the tenant and the owner. And I think you do a really good job of taking some of those ideas that we have to help keep the TI low for everybody.
Right.
Right, which helps make a deal actually happen.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, we're here to service our clients and get the best deal for them, so they'll keep using us.
That's right. Well, I want to thank you for joining us for this episode. Ancon Construction is a 100% employee-owned, award-winning design-build construction firm. To learn more about us, visit us at anconconstruction.com, and let's get your project started together.